Hi guys, my name is Minhajuddin Ansari, and today I will discuss how single-dimensional and multi-dimensional arrays are stored in the main memory. So first I'm going to talk about the single-dimensional array, and I'm going to define an array num of size 3, and I'm going to initialize it to 1, 2, and 3. So I'm going to initialize it to 3 elements. Now, from the definition of an array, the definition of the array says that the elements of an array are stored contiguously in the main memory. That means they are stored side by side. They are stored adjacently in the main memory. So let me first draw my main memory right here. And we discussed about this in our previous tutorial. The main memory is simply bytes connected together in a series. So this is my main memory. Each box represents a byte. So if this single dimensional array num were to be stored inside the main memory, it would be stored somewhat like this. Now for the first element is 1, and an integer occupies 4 bytes. So the first element would occupy 4 bytes right here. This is for the integer element 1. And the next element, which is 2, would again occupy 4 bytes. So this is for the integer element 2, and the third element would again occupy 4 bytes. So this is how the integer array num would be stored in the main memory. And keep in mind that the bytes are contiguous. That means the array elements are stored in adjacently. There's not a gap in between them. There's not a gap of 1 byte or 2 bytes or a few bytes in between the elements of the array. They are all stored together in adjacently. So this is how a single dimensional array is stored in the main memory. Now let's go to multi-dimensional arrays. So let me again define my multi-dimensional array num, and it's going to be a 2-dimensional array just for the sake of simplicity. And it's simply going to have 2 arrays in it, and each of those 2 subarrays will have 2 integer elements in it. So if I were to represent it, it would be somewhat like this. This multidimensional array has 2 arrays in it, and each of those 2 arrays has my purple color. No, let me check a black color. 2 integer elements in them. So how would this multidimensional array be stored in the main memory? Well, there are 2 ways. It can either be stored following the row major format, or it can be stored following the column major format. So first I'm going to talk about the row major format, and let me again first write my main memory, and I'm going to draw the bytes of the main memory. And I'm going to need a lot of bytes because there are 4 integers in here. So for example, this is my main memory. So the row major format simply means that after the element 1, element 2 is stored, and after the element 2, element 3 is stored, and after the element 3, element 4 is stored. So for example, element 1 is stored right here. It occupies 4 bytes, and after element 1, directly element 2 is stored, and this also occupies 4 bytes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after element 2, element 3 is stored, and this occupies 4 bytes as well. And after element 3, element 4 is stored, and this occupies 4 bytes as well. So this is how a multidimensional array can be stored in row major format. So the second format is column major format. So let me again draw my main memory and the bytes. Sorry about the rough drawing. So this is my main memory, and now if I wanted to store this multi-dimensional 2-dimensional array in column major format, what would happen is that first element 1 would be stored, and then element 3 would be stored, and then element 2 would be stored, and then element 4 would be stored. So it would be something like this. For element 1, this 4 bytes occupied by element 1, and then 4 bytes occupied by element 3, and then 4 bytes occupied by element 2, and then let me draw one more byte here, and then 4 bytes occupied by element 4. So this is the column major format. This is how a multidimensional array is stored in column major format, and this is how multidimensional array is stored in row major format. And just one more thing before I end this tutorial, the address of the array, the address, like you know that variables also have addresses, and we talked about this in our previous tutorial, and we will talk about this when we're going to talk about pointers. But just for a heads up, the address of the array will be the address of the first byte which the array occupies. So in this case, the address of this array will be the address of the first byte of this multidimensional array. Similarly, the address of the single dimensional array would be the address of the first byte occupied by this array. And I'm going to go into detail about this later on. So if you're confused about this, don't worry about it at all. Just keep in mind that this is how single and multi-dimensional arrays are stored in the main memory. So thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section.